Now I'd like to welcome Aaron Aldrich. Aaron's from Cage Data. He's a technical evangelist over there, and I think he does some other stuff too. But really, so show of hands, how many folks here are on call? Not right now, but part of an on-call rotation? So I'd say about a third of you. Now, a show of hands, how many people here have once been part of an on-call rotation? So probably more than half of you. Aaron's going to be talking about burnout and how to solve some of the challenges that come from on-call. Please welcome Aaron. He's on the wireless lavalier.
How about now? There we go. Great. So yeah, I'm going to talk about burnout and specifically how it relates to on-call. Let me move that up a little bit so that it's not. Sorry, I wanted to show off my Boston DevOps shirt because it's like my favorite shirt that I got from out there, and it's not helping with the mic. So yeah, so burnout I think is a major problem that we have in the industry, and I think on-call contributes to that. I think there's a lot of correlation between those. First, who I am. I'm Aaron Aldrich. You can find me on Twitter at Crazy, because I think how language systems work are fascinating, and I hate when people can spell my name right the first time. I work at Cage Data, but beyond that, I have a life outside, and that's really where I think a lot of the burnout starts to become a problem, when it starts to affect our lives beyond just professionally. And it's a big issue, especially in the IT industry. I think it's not a surprise that a lot of people start to get exhausted from working this. Burnout's contributed whenever you have any industry that's fast-paced, when you have high stakes and you work long hours. So how many people have deployed after hours? You know, how many people, when they get a call for on-call, is during the business day and you work your normal hours? No one. So I think that pretty much illustrates my point there. But the issue with burnout is that it doesn't just affect our satisfaction, but it has health effects as well. I think what's a little bit harder to talk about, especially, is that it can have mental health effects, and especially in an industry where there seems to be anxiety-prone, depression-prone, with things like imposter syndrome adding on to that. When you start to feel exhausted with your work and worn out and burnt out, it doesn't help. In extreme cases, there are stories of people committing suicide just from burning out. And it's hard to talk about in mental health in general in our culture, let alone specifically in the IT industry. But something that's a little bit more relatable, I think, is the story of Jurassic Park. So how many don't know the story of Jurassic Park? Good, so we're all on board. We know there's dinosaurs and they eat people. But what I want to reframe is the story of Dennis Nedry, right? So you've got this kind of rogue developer who kind of kicked this whole thing into motion. But I don't think he started out wanting to cause problems for InGen and Jurassic Park, because he was offered a job as the chief architect for a theme park with real live dinosaurs. That sounds like a fantastic dream job. So I think he was really excited, but the working conditions, I think having to meet deadlines for investors, dealing with a company that refused to pay him more when he said, hey, my workload's way beyond what I expected. They didn't hire anyone, it was just him. I think he burned out and caused a lot of problems for it. So it's interesting to kind of reframe that way. So obviously burnout's a lot bigger than just on-call, but I think it's a major contributing factor that we can fix, because when you're talking about fast-paced, high stakes, and long hours, this kind of sums it up. On-call exists because systems run 24 hours a day, but we don't run 24 hours a day. We need sleep, we need to eat, and just for our mental health, we need free time. We need to engage in something that's not systems fixing, breaking, firefighting all the time. So what happens is, instead of it being something where you say, oh, I can jump in and fix a problem, and you volunteer to kind of help out, you end up being told that you have to work these extra hours. No one's volunteering for on-call. But I want to kind of change the way that's framed out. What I want to do is treat on-call like an emergency response team for your technology assets. because it shouldn't be just a maintenance task that you're doing every single night after hours. It should only be an issue when there's an emergency. And it sounds a little bit extreme because you're not necessarily working on the same stakes as like a firefighter or EMT. There's not human life directly at stake necessarily. But if you frame the stakes in terms of your business as a unit, you know, it might be. Something might actually be on fire in your data center, and it has to be dealt with. So there's three aspects we can kind of look at changing this. And the first one is making the on-call actually mean something. So the way I propose it is through actionable alerts. When I get an alert, it should mean that I have to do something. It shouldn't just be waking up in the middle of the night, right? Great, I'm on call. That means I don't get sleep tonight. You know, Etsy did extensive studies actually discovering that even if you get a call in the middle of the night and it's a 15-minute response and fix, it interrupts that entire night's of sleep. You lose, you know, hours of sleep even for a 15-minute response time. So it's really important that we try not to interrupt people. And if all we're doing is waking up and running through really menial tasks, or even just waking up, seeing, oh, the system's down, nope, it's back up, okay. Right? You start to feel really terrible about it because that's like what people treat you for. So actionable alerts, how do we get to this point? We want to ask 3 questions about any alert that we have coming in. Does it matter? Can it wait? Or can the person alerted actually respond to the alert? If you're saying no to any of these, like maybe it shouldn't actually wake somebody up. So the first part of that, does it matter, is a really important piece of this. I think this is a great illustration. Has a car alarm ever prompted you to take some action against car theft? 95% of people said no. But 59% said they took action to turn off the car alarm. Like, that's not a good alert. So the only action that alert is prompting is to stop the alert from happening, not actually fix any potential problem. So if it's something that we can't do anything about or we don't care about it, it just needs to be, it's probably something that's just a metric. It needs to be logged, saved for later. It might be good data for correlation later on, but we don't need to wake someone up to tell them about it. Especially now as monitoring shifting to caring more about business metrics, I don't necessarily care that I'm running at 90% CPU all the time if everything's going through fine. That just means I'm using my instances to capacity. So can it wait? You know, that's a major contributing factor too. So I don't know how many times you've gotten an alert in the middle of the night that disk space will be full in a couple days. Right? Like, I don't care right now. I would like to sleep. And besides that, I think H.G. Wells puts it really well. It sounds plausible enough tonight, but wait till tomorrow for the common sense of the morning. So there's something to that, right? If you're waking up in the middle of the night trying to deal with a disk space thing that can wait anyway, but you're up now, so you might as well fix it, and you're still kind of groggy, you're making probably terrible business decisions if you're half asleep, and you're fighting someone for keyboard space while you're still sitting in bed. So, right, if it can wait, maybe it should generate a ticket in your ticketing system. It might even be high priority. It might be, we need to fix the disk space issue tomorrow before noon, but it doesn't need to happen at 2 a.m. And the final is, can the alerted respond? So the major thing is, if I get an alert and I can't actually do anything about it, I start to feel a bit inept and extremely frustrated. So if all we're doing is alerting someone who might be layer 1 of defense, so you're alerting your junior technician because they're the one that's on call, but it's a really complex beta system that's out. They don't know anything about it. The developers are kind of managing it themselves, but there's a couple key customers running it. All they are is a glorified switchboard at this point. All they're doing is routing calls from one side of the business to another, and we can solve that with technology, right? Like, we have computers that do this for us. So there's many alerting systems out there that can route calls in a skill-based manner, and that's how we should be treating not just our phone calls, but how we treat our engineers, making sure the right people get the right information. So let's say we've got all that. That's kind of an individual thing we can do. We can start crafting our alerts to mean something and routing them to the right people. The next thing we have to do is kind of reshape how our team functions around on-call. We need to start building support structures around the individuals that are on call, making sure they have the tools and the resources they need. Otherwise, you get a call in the middle of the night and you kind of feel left out in the woods, maybe not in the right equipment, don't really know where you're going. Cell phone probably doesn't work, I would bet, so that call's not going to help. Rather than an actual organized team equipped properly for the environment they're dealing with. That's what our goal is. So for OnCall, what tools are we working with? Documents. That's a major portion of OnCall. Because if you're getting a call at 2, 3 a.m., you don't always remember what everything is, let alone can actually see what you're working on. So we want to document literally all of the things about any alert that comes in. Runbooks are basically what help you get through that initial alert process. Whether or not it fixes the issue, which hopefully it does, but if it doesn't fix the issue, you've at least gone through a ritual to get you in the mode of actually troubleshooting now. You've gone through some steps, you've logged into some systems, you've remembered your credentials, you're getting through into that phase, and you can do some advanced troubleshooting, or at least you have an escalation process if it's not working. If we're not familiar with runbooks, they tell you what and how of any situation. So they're going to tell you what that outage affects, and they're going to tell you how you can begin going about fixing it, and how you can escalate that problem. This is kind of an example. This is a pretty simple runbook. It's just a template troubleshooting article from Confluence for anyone that uses Atlassian out there. It gives you the problem, it gives you a solution. I would say it should have an escalation process in there as well, but this is a real basic, minimally viable, where can I start? The best thing is that if you have a really good runbook and working through these steps fixes it every time, now I don't need a person to do it because I've got a script and I can actually have a computer run through scripts. If I've got a computer that's working 24 hours a day all the time anyway, they should also be the thing doing the work late at night, letting humans sleep. But I mentioned something about escalation as well. A lot of times, runbooks don't fix the problem. When you have particularly bad outages, a runbook isn't going to help you because you're working in the unknown failures at that point. So we need to make calling for help okay. There's a pretty big stigma, especially from the junior to senior passover. If I get an on-call alert, I should be able to run through and fix it, but I can't or it's not working. We need to encourage our senior engineers that it's okay for the junior engineers to wake them up in the middle of the night if they need to escalate an issue. We need to encourage that behavior in teams that we're all there to support each other. And sometimes it's totally, you forgot what the correct command was or the syntax. Like, that's okay, it's 3 in the morning. It should be acceptable that someone who's just learning the syntax doesn't always remember it in every situation. So calling for help needs to be encouraged as well. I'd much rather have someone wake me up in the middle of the night for a dumb question to fix a system than find out an hour and a half later they made it way worse trying to fix it on their own. So if we've got a team working together, we need to start changing the way the company looks at that, the way our actual culture functions. Because we've got actionable alerts in our team supporting us, but we keep having problems and we're not improving, that's when it's going to continue to cause this ongoing burnout. The way we shape culture is through our stories, right? And so the stories we tell, we want to be interesting. If the story about, hey, remember that time none of the servers alerted and everything worked totally fine? Like, that ends up here, not interesting at all. There's a bug on my screen, but it doesn't show up in screenshots, right? Not an interesting story. We like stories that contain struggle. The more interesting stories that we tell are ones about, there was a server outage, I went to go investigate it, but I couldn't connect to anything remotely. I had to go physically to our data centers. We went there, found power issues, rebooting things, took out the power to the entire site. We had to reboot the breakers, but you had to pump and prime the electrical system. That was out in a shack by the raptor pens, but since the power was out, obviously the raptors escaped, and I like the story of Jurassic Park, so it continues, right? Dinosaurs are great. So, but you get the point, right? The story is only interesting because there's problems. Like, things go wrong and there's stuff to solve. And it's okay. Like, telling stories is how we deal with this as a stressor in our lives, too. So it's all right to share those stories, because if we just have to experience that alone, it also causes a buildup of stress and frustration. The problem comes when the stories don't change. When that's the only story we're telling, of how things keep going wrong and how you had to heroically swoop in at the last moment and save the day, it causes problems in your team culture. From Pivotal Labs, if you can't read it, software development, it turns out, is a team sport. What's worse, encouraging the hero mentality, encouraging that one person to save the day all the time, leads to corrosive dysfunction in software teams. So if we're encouraging a single person to fix things all the time, the whole team starts to suffer from that. People stop working together. Part of this is we need to actually make sure our engineers are getting recognized for the extra work that they do. You're getting paid to work there's some engineers in the audience. So you're getting paid to work a general job, and outages and on-call alerting shouldn't be the normal thing that they do. That should be the exception. It doesn't necessarily mean monetary compensation. It can in certain organizations, but what's happening is if I work all night, 2 nights in a row, and I'm working through like a 48-hour major outage, it's pretty absurd to assume that I'm going to come in at 7:30 in the morning the next day for my regular work hours. Like, it's pretty logical to say, hey, take the next couple of days off, rest, you deserve it, you need it, and we need to start changing that story. It shouldn't just be, hey, it's so great that you went above and beyond because this is what you normally do. We need to start saying, hey, I'm sorry you had to do that. That shouldn't happen again. How can we fix that? And how can we fix that leads us to, oh, that's the wrong direction, leads us to blameless postmortems. We need to close the feedback loop on any on-call incidents. As we talked about before, we kind of want to feel out when it's appropriate to do. If we can answer all the questions in our postmortem with a couple people, maybe we don't need to do something huge. But we need to close that feedback loop and figure out how we can stop these alerts from happening after hours. This also illustrates why I don't totally like the language of blameless postmortem. It's a little bit morbid, but we can go on from there. For people that aren't familiar with, has everyone heard of blameless postmortem? Anyone yes heard or not heard? Know what it is? No reaction either way, because I asked 2 questions and asked you to raise your hands on a binary question. But this is a pretty good sum up. So Jason Hand has done presentations on blameless postmortems. The general gist of it is people aren't what's broken in that. Someone didn't particularly cause a problem. Your system malfunctioned in a way that allowed that person to make those mistakes. Everyone made the best decisions they could with the information and tools they had at the time that they made them. What I like better, again, because blameless postmortem, I'm not thrilled about the language. It still focuses on blame and things breaking. I like better learning review for a couple different reasons. You know, you think syntax isn't huge, but you know, syntax matters in programming languages. It matters in real language too. That's how we program each other and communicate information. So what we're focusing on learning, because that's the ideal point of the postmortem. We want to learn what happened and learn how we can stop it from occurring again. And calling it a review instead of a postmortem means I don't have to wait for a failure to learn about something good. You know, maybe something went really well and we want to review that process. I've even heard of it brought up that you can mentally project what's the worst case scenario with us doing this deployment and walk back on a postmortem on this made up situation. It gives you much better foresight into what could go wrong. It invokes hindsight bias in something that hasn't happened yet. You know, of course that would go wrong. So there's a lot more to that, but it's a whole other conversation. The point is we need to close the feedback loop and engage in learning, not just, oh, an incident happened, but we fixed it. We need to investigate that further and learn from it. So there's a lot of different pieces to it. My main point of all of this, summing it up, whether we have actionable alerts and we're making it actually mean something to individuals, building the support structure so the team understands what's an on-call, or changing the culture so the company's on board. It's about people making changes. Since people change only themselves, I can only encourage you to take the first steps. Whatever portion of this process you can actually enact in your business, start doing that. Because that's how we start spreading this culture. If you can change alerting in your company for even one system, so making your alerts mean something when they come out, you can start spreading that to everyone else. And that can hopefully move on through everybody. To sum up what I'm trying to go through here, Dennis Nedry was a victim of bad culture. The company didn't care about them. They didn't care about the extra work they had to do. They didn't care about making the situation better. You know, he didn't have a support team to speak of. He had, I think, Samuel L. Jackson, who kind of hated him. And, you know, I'm sure their alerting system was everything all the time. I don't even think they got alerts because they never left that room. So what I'm trying to say really is, don't be InGen, don't be Dennis Nedry, and don't get eaten by dinosaurs. Thank you. Is there any questions? Nothing. Good. Maybe it's good, maybe it's not, I don't know. There's a question here, I think.
All right, we have a microphone.
Oh, great.
Your name first, please.
Hey, I'm Clinton Wolf. I rudely arrived like halfway through your talk, so I'm so sorry. You may have covered this.
It's okay.
But I was going to ask, you mentioned compensating people for going above and beyond, and
Sure.
or actually having to do on call and all that sort of thing. In DevOps, we often want to have more people be on call and have developers be on call and that sort of thing. And one of the biggest pieces of resistance to that is, developers will say things like, well, that's not my job description. There's also the fundamental fact that I just don't want to do that.
Right.
But then as a compensation issue, there's also the question of, well, when the ops person was hired, they were told they were doing it, and so when they negotiated their salary and all of that sort of thing, they assumed they would be doing on-call. But a developer didn't. So when a developer is told they also have to do on-call, should there be any adjustment? How do you propose that be handled?
So my proposal is actually for both sides of that. I think that's a problem that ops is considering, hey, I'm going to have to be on call and do a lot of work above and beyond my work hours, because we really want to frame on-call alerting, after-hour on-call alerting, as the exception to the norm, not the normal thing that occurs. So I think additional compensation, whether it's monetary, again, it's going to depend on the business. Some businesses don't necessarily have a ton of money to pay you out the overtime for working 80 hours. That may not be feasible just as a business. But having that understanding of, if I put in all of these extra hours, I should be expected that I don't necessarily have to do my standard workload the next day, the day after. Maybe, hey, you know what, take next week off. You've been doing fantastic. We've done a ton of releasing. You really need rest. I don't want you to get exhausted from doing this. Take a week off, rest, do what you need to. So compensation doesn't have to be monetary. It can be other things that's there as well.
Not to say that ops don't have schedules or commitments or anything like that, but developers tend to be on 2-week sprints or something like that. They say, you worked your butt off overnight, take a week off.
Well, right. That's not necessarily a good scale of 1 to a week, right?
Yeah.
But you can go into it, because it's probably every company's going to be different, right? Because this is going to get into the culture of how you work and how you compensate your employees and everything that's there.
Yeah, it's a sound idea, too. I used to pay a differential for a team, so it wasn't huge, but they got paid for the week they were on call.
Right.
So there's tons of solutions. Right?
And I've had that as well on call. I worked with one company where it was nice. We recognized that an on-call incident isn't just that time that you work. There's an interruption to that as well. So for the first incident in any 24-hour period, we got paid out for 2 hours additional on top of whatever it was, plus the time to complete that incident. So in that case, it was all monetary. It doesn't make it better, right? We have to do the learning reviews, because that's what's really going to help the healing in this whole on-call pain that we have. But it helps to know that you're at least being recognized and compensated for that. It also helps prioritize those incidents to the business. Making those fixes a high priority helps when you have to keep paying people every time they're on call. Suddenly, yeah, maybe it is a priority that we fix that problem, not just ship a new feature.
All right, cool. We have another question over here. Your name first, please.
My name is Billy Bryant.
Hey.
I think mine is more of a statement, really, to going back to compensating. For a lot of us in this industry, whether we like it or not, we're salaried employees.
Yeah.
Especially high-level engineers, because your company doesn't want to pay you the total number of hours you work, because the company would go broke.
Of course.
So I think one of the biggest things that our group in the company I'm in seems to see as beneficial to us is take the time to reward your group with team building. Exercises that are off hours, off business time. Times when your team can get together in an environment where they're not really expected to discuss work, or they're not expected to be responsible immediately for what's going on during the day, and can have some time to decompress, have some fun time, whatever it may be, laser tag, going out to a local arcade if you have one of those around you, something like that. I think that really does help, and plus you get some time to learn your team and know your team a little bit better. That way you have a better understanding of what everybody's strengths are and what drives everybody when they're not in the office.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good conversation about it as well. So we do that as a company internally. So we make sure we take time not just because of incidents, but because as a whole we know how much work everyone puts in. To take time out from that, take outings as a company, maybe 1 or 2 people are responsible for just keeping an ear to the ground, find out if there's a major issue we need to respond to it, but we're not necessarily continuing the work. But kind of as management, you can lay out that like, hey, we're here to relax. Like, let's not try and solve a bunch of work problems just because we're here right now and together. Like, let's actually relax and kick back and do something decompressing or just relaxing in that way.
And if it's not during work hours, don't require it. Don't
True.
reward someone for working more by making them work more.
Absolutely. Opt-in is big. Opt-in is big in the whole Agile concept. It's big in DevOps as well, right? If someone doesn't want to do something, forcing them to do it isn't going to make them like it.
We have time for one more question. Is that a hand or a pin being held? That's a pin. One more question. Going, gone. Well, thanks so much, Aaron. An important topic. We need to solve these challenges as a profession.
I'd love to talk more as well. I have to leave a little early today, so don't wait to talk to me to an open space. So I'll be around, and feel free to grab me and have a conversation.
Thanks so much, Aaron. Big hand.